Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Echoes in the Dark. I am Bloodborne. Glad to have you all here with me tonight. We are going to be talking about the Burglar class tonight, pretty much exclusively. So, I hope you guys play some Burgs. I actually have a good friend of mine here that I recently went to TwitchCon with. His name is Brookgrim. I've actually played with Brookgrim for 9 years now. We go pretty far back in this game, and he actually has played a Burg almost that entire time. He dabbled into some other characters and whatnot. Now, he won't be on camera, but I do have him on voice, and so I will be bringing him in just a second here. All right. All right, Dave, you there?
Yep.
All right, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, not much. Logged into a bull roar right now.
All right, testing out some changes.
Yeah, looking at that, looking at what they changed for the gear updates here, seeing if anything's too different from build 2.
Anything standing out at you right away?
Nothing too much in terms of gear. The big difference here between at least beta 1 and beta 3 now is the decrease in the buff to regular DPS that was made. They said they originally buffed it by 60 some percent, and now it's down by 30 some percent.
Okay. So, in general, well, actually, I kind of told people a little bit about who you are, but kind of introduce yourself and what your experiences with the game.
Alright, well, I've been playing since 2007. Started on Shadows of Angmar. Rolled a Hunter first, but then quickly leveled up a Berg because Hunter really wasn't my style. And I've made a Berg ever since. PvP'd quite a bit, made it to rank 9 without any of the store buffs before that was even a thing. But mainly I really enjoyed the game for the PvE aspect. I really enjoy raiding. So I've done all raids at level and always done them tier 2 challenge when that was a thing. If you remember back in Shadows of Angmar, the Rift was the Rift. There was no tier 2 challenge.
Right.
And yeah, so I've played a Berg for, I don't know, close to 10 years now. And mainly my experience with the Berg is playing it in raids.
Okay. And then, so from the time that you were playing back in Shadows of Angmar and Moria and things like that, what purpose did your class play in those scenarios?
So the Berg was a great buffer and debuffer, and it provided some decent single target DPS. Not on par with the Hunter, which was single target DPS king, but respectable. Definitely way above any other support classes DPS because we didn't have as many support utilities as those other classes did. And then the big thing, obviously, in Shadows and Mines of Moria were conjunctions. To do Blind 1 hard mode and the Darnagbud, it required a burglar to hit a conjunction at a specific time to actually do that fight on level. If you didn't do it at the right time for an interrupt, well, then it was a wipe. But, you know, it was also used, if you remember, the very last fight in the Rift, hitting some CJs on the Balrog as he's starting to jump up in the air to clear a bunch of wounds, fears, poisons, whatever. I forget exactly what was in there. But
a little bit of everything.
It was important to hit those things, and the group all worked together. You had assigned slots for the conjunction. You'd hit it, and you'd get a massive heal of morale, power. You do a decent amount of damage direct, and also some damage over time. So you know, your job really was to increase the raid's overall DPS while providing good single target DPS yourself, and also some crowd control when needed. You know, lore masters are obviously king of crowd control back then, but burglars would do a pretty good job with keeping at least one target locked down while also providing stuns for other targets while debuffing them. So, you know, it was a support class, but it also had, DPS secondary.
All right. I actually have CEO in here. I'm going to bring him into the channel real quick. Let's see. I actually need him to hop into another voice channel so I can bring him down here. So for you, um, when I know you stopped playing for a little while and came back, what kind of made you step away for a little bit, and then what brought you back?
Yeah, so I stopped playing for a couple of years after the what was it, Easter Rohan came out. We got our we got our two raids, and uh, well, frankly, they weren't very challenging. Didn't take very long to complete, and there was nothing left to do in the game. And at that time in the game, I felt like there was quite a bit of hostility towards the raiding community, and it took a long time for those raids to even come out. I remember rebuilding Hypebuild for a year. So, it was at that
Right.
point when there wasn't any content left for me to do that was challenging or rewarding, then I decided to step away for a little while. And then I returned because you let me know that there's going to be another raid, Throne of the Dread Terror.
Right. Hey, CEO, if you are doing voice detection, hit change it to push to talk for me. Um, so going as far back as Shadows of Angmar with things like the Rift, what how do you think it's come full circle, if you will, or where do you think it's at right now as far as the burglar?
Well, up until this raid, the bird, one bird was always needed for the raid. As it got later and later, and conjunctions weren't really a thing anymore because most bosses were immune to them. They were still needed for their debuffing capabilities and crowd control capabilities, as well as their decent single target DPS and overall buffing of group damage. So, but with the new raid, frankly, the burglar does not have a spot for every fight. It's possible to have them on most fights, but it's really a huge liability to the group, and you have to rely on the other players to make up for what you cannot bring to the table.
Okay. And then let's see, Sia, are you in here now? Maybe yes, no. Okay, so we'll keep talking then. Yes, we are talking about the Berg. And again, Dave, if you see anything in chat that you want to touch on, any questions that people have in there, feel free to just chime in, and we'll talk about it. But as far as do you think there is a specific spec right now um, that is better for that raid, or completely useless, or are we talking about like complete under the hood changes that you think need to be made?
I would go for complete under the hood changes need to be made because of trait trees. So when I
Okay.
came back to this game, I was really surprised because I didn't see any of my skills anymore, and
Right.
they fundamentally changed the class of the burglar with trait trees. By removing the debuffs that you have and buffs from your tricks from Redline, which is essentially what burglar really is, it really fundamentally changed the class because in Yellow Line, you don't have any of your single target damaging skills to provide some decent single target DPS anymore. So I think there really needs to be a complete overhaul of the burglar to rethink this class. And as far as best spec in the raid goes, I think Yellow Line is the only line that's viable. Burglars do not do enough single target DPS to even consider them having in a DPS stance. They're best served either debuffing or buffing a target for the rest of the raid.
Okay. Um, so you kind of mentioned where because I know the last time you played, we didn't have trait trees yet, or we just got them.
We did not. I left just before trait trees, I believe.
Okay.
You still had to go to a bard and equip the few legendary traits that you wanted, like exposed throat, flashing blades, that sort of thing.
Right. All right. So, what about other content? Like right now, obviously we've been talking about rating specifically. Um, what are your thoughts? Like even in a 6-man or some of the 3-mans that we have now, what's your take on that with running the burglar?
Burglars can go in 6-mans. They can do Domestar's 2-2 challenge. They can do Silent Street 2-2 challenge, but you're not going to take more than one burglar, and you need to rely on the rest of your group to provide the damage that you're taking away. You can go red line for those. Frankly, though, I still think yellow line is more viable for a 6-man because buffing your target by 31.6% incoming damage is going to outweigh your DPS in red line with only reveal weakness, which is plus, what is it? 18 point whatever percent incoming. Hey, Sio, how you doing?
Hey.
I think where burglars suffer the most is 3-man content because we do not have any AoE skills. We can only do single target, which is a huge, huge disadvantage.
Sure.
And to top that off, where our single target DPS isn't anywhere close to what hunters can do. Yeah, we have aim and coup de grace that does burst, but that's once a minute, and aside from that, our burst is really minimal. You compare that to one tick of Smoldering Wrath from an RK.
Right. So real quick, since we have CO in here, let's tell us a little bit about yourself. How long you've been playing the game? What's your experience with the Berg? And kind of same stuff we were talking about with Brooke is, what's your take on the class where it was when you started playing the game and compared to where it is now, and then where ultimately where you think it needs to go?
Well, I've been playing the game for about 6 years, but I only picked the Berg up, I think, 4 years ago. So the prime time of Berg rating I wasn't really there for.
Okay.
I started playing Berg when it was broken in the Moors, and I think we're going to get back to that point pretty soon.
And I'm being told that we need to know how to pronounce your name correctly.
I pronounce it Cielran.
Okay.
You can just call me Cia if you want.
Yeah, I'm terrible with pronunciations of names in general, so I go with the shortest thing I can find.
Yeah.
But continue.
I find the state it's in right now is good. Like, of course, 3-mans, there's nothing you can really do except for run tier 1.
Okay.
Raid, I think it has more utility than the Hunter. Of course, Hunter's just DPS. But like Yellowberg, it can supplement a captain in most roles, or most instances.
Now, have you been in the situations of using your Berg in tier 2?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the experience been there? Like, have you been doing the whole throne raid in tier 2, or do you have to swap out at all, or what's that look like for you?
I've been having to swap out on 4th boss just because it doesn't have the DPS or corruption removals needed for that, but I've done everything else so far, and it actually works really well in yellow line.
Okay, and so
Red line just doesn't have the DPS, of course.
Right. And I know, Dave, you've had quite a bit of experience actually doing Throne Tier 2 on your RK, and mainly because of where you felt things were with the Berg going Tier 2. And I know there's actually been a pretty recent thread that I know that you've been involved in with even the Hunter changes, and I don't want to dive too much into that. I actually want to bring Chromite in again on a different topic for that one. But it seems to me that, and you guys can both give me your take on this, but that from what I hear a lot of, it's the trait trees that really kind of, I don't want to say ruined things, but really kind of put a wrench into things as far as the development of a class. Would you agree with that? Would you think you have a different take on that? I'm going to go with, since we've been talking a little bit first, Dave, CEO, what's your take on that?
In my opinion, it's just hard to go from 3 times of your skills of being useful, like debuffing and DPSing at the same time, to having to pick between them.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would echo that sentiment too. And I just don't feel like Yellow Line is also powerful enough to make up for the lack of DPS that you are not contributing any longer.
So I mean, would you think? So it sounds like both of you, when you do tier 2 content, you're mostly doing it in Yellow Line when you are going to do it.
Mhm.
Do you think it's something as simple as like, kind of like what we're seeing with the Hunter with this damage increase coming up? Is it something that Yellow Line really needs a substantial boost to damage to make it kind of solidify that as a role?
I mean, it would help a lot. It's just the issue with Berg is situational DPS. You need positional to be putting out any kind of numbers at all.
Very true. And that's very hard to do in a lot of instances and in the raid. But you know, something about the Yellow Line that I think needs a huge buff is that I would go away from saying giving your DPS back in Yellow Line, because then what is Red Line supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I would be more in favor of giving a buff to the burglars buffs and debuffs in Yellow Line, making it so that Trickster wasn't on such a long cooldown, for instance, making it a lot shorter. That would help. Also, Mischievous Glee, I think that needs to be a lot more potent. It should be allowed to crit, so that you can actually provide some decent off heals for the group. And to follow up with that, the skill that removes a trick and applies one of the 4 CJ effects needs a serious boost as well. If they started there, I think that would provide that'd be a good starting point to help the Berg out in the Yellow Line, and also providing some sort of in combat res would be amazing. That would, I think, make people really reconsider Bergs for a lot of tier 2 content.
So you have a question from Minnie down in the chat, and it's a question for both of you, and it's based on the changes you've seen in Bull Roar. Is it enough to deem the burglars viable now, or is there a more specific thing you'd still like to be changed? And I think we've kind of touched on some of that already, but is there something, if you could, we'll just do this. If there is one thing that you could say, this is going to be changed right now, and it can be even for each line, so you can go blue, yellow, red, what would that one change be?
AoE.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue. See how you put it very well, is the lack of AoE. Either you got to give burglars insane single target DPS to make up for the lack of AoE, or give us some AoE, because it really hurts not having AoE.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
you can put out the single target numbers. It's not going to be as high as an RK, but then you can just take a champ and do far more. They can hit everything.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, and I'd also like to mention something about champions as well. On their Yellow Line, their armor end is a huge buff to group DPS as well.
Yes, it is. So let's see.
But to answer that a little bit more, Minnie, looking at your question here in chat, from what I'm seeing right now on Bull Roar, burglars and 3-mans are still going to have they're still going to have a lot of challenges ahead of them.
Now I have kind of a unique question here, as far, and this is actually just from my own personal experiences, Dave, because I've run with you for so long. As far back as SOA, all the way up to current stuff. Do you think that there was maybe during the time of Riders of Rohan, do you think there might have been like a cultural shift as far as what really classified a group as successful? And what I mean by that is, do you think it was just things kind of shifted to how quickly you can beat it, and that kind of deemed it as successful, rather than, it actually being completed? Like if it took you 30 minutes to do it, but then you can bring another class and it's 10 minutes, well, I'm always going to take the 10-minute class now because that's what success looks like. Do you think there's some of that embedded in this as well?
Yeah, I could possibly see that, but also, to be fair, if you're going to bring in a class that's going to take you 20 minutes longer to complete something, well, that 20 minutes spent, unless we're talking about just burning through trash, but if that's 20 minutes longer spent on a boss, that's 20 minutes longer for something terrible to go wrong.
Right, sure.
So that's a huge liability.
Yep, absolutely.
But as far as mechanics wise go, yeah, it kind of seems like around Rohan there were some some instances that started introducing some DPS race mechanics. Whereas back in Shadows, I can't recall any DPS race mechanics that come up. Maybe you can remember some, but I don't recall any DPS race mechanics in Shadows.
Ooh, Chromite actually brings up a very interesting point here. Maybe one of the reasons for the faster DPS is so much wanted because of the broken RNG in instances. So you just have to run things so many times. So actually burning through content, uh, you might have to run something 20, 30 times. So you would probably want to take a class that could do that a lot more effectively or quickly, I should say. And that I think there's some substance there as well, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely echo your sentiment there, Chromite.
Something like, what do you think? And this is for both of you guys. What do you think would be an answer to an AOE? Is it reducing the? Well, is it just giving you multiples? Are you talking about one powerful one? Um, I know I talked to you, Dave, a while back about another game's skill that had. Um, they have a pretty insane AOE skill, and they have a skill that also causes uh, the targets to bleed out at 400%. It's called Twist the Knife. Are there mechanics like that you'd like to see, or is it just you need the AOE damage added in to feel more viable?
I think without like making all of our skills AoE at a reduced damage rate, it's just not going to help. Like a bleed spread would be helpful in PvP, but in a PvE setting, it'd be almost ineffective.
Really? Huh. I think a bleed spread would be very effective in PvE, actually. But I would actually just rather see something like cunning attack, something that you can trait to make it AoE, so it can affect up to 6 targets or something like that. And some of our crit chain response skills to be able to be traded to make them AoE, like double edge strike and flashing blades. Flashing blades seems like it should be AoE in the first place if you've seen the animation in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
I think doing a couple things like that, something that are already on fairly short cooldowns that we use in a rotation all the time, that we can trait to be AoE when we want them to be, I think that would be fantastic. The idea of trick spreading bleeds, I'm a little hesitant to do that because when you're putting tricks out, you don't always want to put a certain trick on certain mobs because you already have another trick up on that mob. So I would rather just be a little less convoluted and more straight ahead, as make it AoE or make it not AoE for that skill.
It wouldn't be ineffective. It just wouldn't be a competitive increase if they want it to be.
Yeah, I agree with that too. You'd need to raise the base level of the burglar skills, which, by the way, I should mention that in the Volrora 3 notes, they mentioned that some burglar skills have been fixed, which in fact they are not. Your second strike and your crit chain skills, your offhand, does not hit for anywhere near what it should be, as well as locations. Everything is not working properly with all skills. And of course, if you play a burglar, you know that provoke debuff does not work.
Or does counter defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the stuff I think that I was kind of touching on with the under the hood stuff. I think before you start really even messing with damage and numbers and things like that, I think the actual functional stuff needs to be addressed. And I mean, it seems like this would be the perfect time since they're actually working on the class. But then, so like, what would you do? What would you like to see? Would it be that you're taking your quiet knife, so your red line? Would you want that to be have that be where your AoE line exists in that because that's your damage roll, or would you want that to be, because we don't hear a whole lot, or I don't hear a whole lot. I actually played Blue Line just because no one wanted to play it. I mean, do you toss some of the love that way, or like where do you think the or the AOE skills should reside in the traits?
I would put like possibly a cunning attack, bleed spread at the top, like a capstone, and then put a like gambler bleed damage as the capstone for blue as a spread, something like that.
Okay.
So you'd like to be in blue line for the AOE spec?
Just different spreads for different lines.
Okay, so you'd like to see AOE for both blue and red lines. Okay. I think red line makes the most sense to me. Honestly, I've always been confused by the blue line for burglar ever since it was kind of introduced, the whole gambler thing. I'm not really sure what it's meant to do. If it's supposed to be more DPS or if it's supposed to be more damage over time.
I think it's a mix of both debuffing and DPS.
Yeah, which is an interesting idea, although it's not viable as a debuff for for instance the capstone for the Lucky Strike that you upgrade, and it gives the target and it's minus attack duration or plus attack duration rather, but it also gives it a mischance, and mischance doesn't do anything on elite nemesis mobs. So basically, any mob that you're fighting, boss in an instance, is not going to be affected by that mischance. So
the tier 6 gamble though also has 30% damage reduction though.
Yes, which is nice. I have heard, I haven't tested this myself. Maybe someone in chat can let me know about this, but I have heard that all those gambles in the blue line are in fact not working properly.
Yeah, I know they actually go on, but that'd be something, since I have that one. My burglar is in blue line. That might be something I can even test with you, Dave. As go hop on there and see what it does to the numbers.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
So okay, so if they were to put we're talking about like the bleed spreads and whatnot, but what about specifically like an AOE initial hit, like actually targeting multiple mobs, where you're kind of getting into the area of the champion where it's a skill that you use and it hits X amount of targets. It doesn't necessarily have a bleed attached to it. It doesn't have necessarily a and it wouldn't have as many targets. Like, you're not gonna take a Berg and hit 13 targets like a champion. But like, what do you think would be a good number? Are you talking 3, 6, somewhere in there? What do you guys think?
I would say 5 or 6 would be a good amount.
Yeah, I would like to see 6 mob targets for the AoE skills. I would love to see a trait in red line that you could make cunning attack hit 6 targets at the same time. That would help tremendously, especially with the slight buff to DPS for cunning attack. Then also capstone, critical response skills like double-edged strike and flashing blades, being able to trait them to affect up to 6 targets or maybe up to 3 targets. Since they do a little bit more damage initially. Still keep champ on top, but give burglar some direct AoE. A lot of classes have some direct AoE skills. Runekeeper does. Warden has an insane amount of AoE. Champions are obviously the king.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to beat 13 targets, and actually, honestly, with Fury of Blades, I don't know what the cap out is on that because it is a frontal cone. So it actually on the tooltip does not specify a target limit, but I'm sure there is one, some hidden one. But I think that would be good, because I've been in situations, specifically with you, Dave, that we've tried to run with your Berg and like Ruin City, for example, and it was pretty painful. Everything took extremely long. Whereas then we flip the roles and either take your RK or my champion, and it's substantially faster, and it's not even a close, like, oh, it takes about 5 minutes longer to do this. Like, no, it takes 15 minutes longer to do it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. It does take substantially longer to do Ruin City on a Berg. It's pretty painful. And it's probably very stressful on, your healer and tank, because you got to be sitting there for a lot longer while mobs are slowly dying. I see someone in chat here asking, let's see, what is this? Asking about the skill in Knives Out in the raid. You want to talk about that a little bit, Sio?
Honestly, I've never run the raid in Redline, so I don't actually have it to use it.
Yeah, and I'll
As
echo that.
a damage reduction, I have both sets, which make it 15-second cooldown, and it's pretty effective when I do it or I am in Redline, but
Yeah, but as far as the raid, I've never used Knives Out because I've never in red line. It's always in yellow line in the raid.
For anybody
I don't
that
seem to be taking too much damage as a Yellowberg anyways in the raid.
So for anybody that is not familiar with certain skills, can you guys tell them what Knives Out is and what it does?
Knives Out, it's a 3-target AoE if you could consider it for damage, but it reduces your incoming melee damage by 80% for 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then it also reflects, I think, 20% of the incoming damage.
Okay.
Yeah, one key thing there, though, that's melee damage. It's not all damage, right? So
Yep.
there's a lot of other damages that are tactical, that are ranged. So it's very situational. I think this skill is most useful for something like PvP.
Do you think there's a are there traits or skills that are tied to current trait specs that you feel belong in other specs, or that should be available in all 3 specs?
I think Enrage should be a little bit lower on the yellow tree so we can get it in red. Be a lot of help.
Yeah, that'd be very nice because Dust in the Eyes is down there. I think it would actually be nice to have all of your tricks very low for like the first things you can grab in the Mischief Maker and still trait red, and then grab those tricks, and then you know keep the Trickster as capstone deeper down the yellow line, so you have incentive to do that. But I think that would do a lot of good for the Burglar. Kind of makes it like what the Burglar used to be by still having those tricks, but having your single target DPS there.
Also, I would love Mischievous Glee in Redline, but as we are getting a power restore, it would be less effective.
And Mischievous Glee in the yellow line, I said before, if anyone's just joined now, I think it needs a serious buff in yellow line to provide some meaningful healing for your group. Because right now, you can get it up to, I think I traded it and got maxed LAs for it, and it was close to 3k, and that's not very often. And
I got mine up
was
to
the whole
4k
fellowship.
with the incoming healing relic stack, but it wasn't too helpful.
Yeah, exactly. It's really just not enough to justify slotting those relics in those places just for that one effect, right?
No.
Do you think your yellow line needs more utility to maybe even justify that in other types of content other than just the raid? Because I know we've focused a lot of conversation around the raid, and I think honestly, specifically tier 2 content is where I think a lot of issues get exposed very quickly, because with the difficulty of the mobs, the added buffs that they get, and I think we really start to see in tier 2 that that's where the issues come out. And do you think there are issues with yellow line's utility even, or do you think that we should go with more of a role specific thing? Like if you are in yellow line, you know you're just flat out not really going to do any damage and you are going full blown support. And if you're going red line, you're going full blown DPS and you're not going to have a whole lot of support. Or do you guys like the blending a little bit?
I like it more in the middle personally. Like I was saying, you can actually fill in the captain role as a yellow burglar depending on the instance. Like in Silent Streets, you can keep the 2 side bosses just perma locked down, so you don't even need the refill money.
Yeah, and that's a very nice thing to have. But I think let's talk about three mans a little bit. Yellow line is not viable at all to take in for three man because it needs DPS. So I'd love to see the yellow line get buffed so that you could actually heal a three man with the yellow line, or
Yeah, I think
maybe
that would
even
be helpful.
yeah, that'd be very helpful if you could do that. Debuff or buff targets and be able to heal would be fantastic to do in the yellow line. Right now, that's not possible. But I have to say, it kind of is the core of the Brigler class, dating back to when it was first made and up until recently, is kind of a blending of the two things. You're not true support, you're not true DPS, but you're a blend of both those things. Hard to say exactly where I'd like to see the Brigler now. I'm a little torn.
Yeah. Well, I know you always used to do a lot of Quiet Knife, um, especially doing like PvP and stuff like that. I know you were always out there stealthing around and popping out and making some people very unhappy.
Yep. Yeah, and as far as Redline goes for three mans or whatever content right now, why it's not viable, I think that Burglars do just fine damage in Tier 1. They're where they need to be. But Tier 2, the mitigations, makes it really, really tough for a Burglar to put out respectable numbers.
Another thing with the revamp coming is PvP. All these great increases for PvE would just completely destroy it.
Yeah, PvP is one of those things. It's a few of us have actually talked about this quite extensively, where that as much as I love PvP, it's always going to be a side project to this game, and it's the way it was designed and the way it was built. It's just unfortunate, honestly, that it is the way it is. And I think anytime they ever try to balance this game towards that element is probably bad for the overall health of the class ecosystem in the game for PvE. I just don't think that's ever a good idea in this particular game, just because of the way the design of the whole system. But that's my personal take on that.
There also is a mechanic where they can restrict use of some things, like minis can't use Song of Distraction. I think if they implemented that for some of the Berg changes, it'd be better for PvP. Not great.
Yeah, I can speak to that as far as the champ was back several years ago when we had our fervor stance. Basically, when we were in PvE, we had a minus 30% incoming healing reduction on when we were actually in that stance in PvE. When you entered the moors, that went away because it was you're typically going to be out there for doing damage, but then being out in the moors, you're going to be taking a lot more, and then having the minus 30% was just real unrealistic for that. So I know that they can do certain things like that, and that's a whole different topic that I've got some ideas around, and we'll do that one on another show. We'll go over some PvP stuff. So, but I think one of the things I'd really like to see as a whole is if Turbine is going to be committed to the 3-spec system of basically having a primary role, and I think that may be a particular issue with the Burglar, is what is its primary function. And I think a lot of people are going to have very different opinions on what that is right now. So maybe it has a little bit of an identity crisis at the moment, and I think they ultimately need to figure out what that role is. And is it something that Yellow Line has a specific role, and Red Line has a specific role, and Blue Line has a specific role? I think that might help long term to kind of get a roadmap for your class. But again, that's just from an outsider looking in. I have a 105 Berg. Don't even profess to know how to play it. I barely know how to log into it. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, red is always going to be just DPS. They're all it is in that line. Yellow, it's really only support. And then blue doesn't have a use right now because it does this relatively the same to red, but it has no burst DPS, which is taking away the Berg's main DPS factor.
Yeah, but I'd definitely like to see some sort of roadmap planned out for the Berg for what it's supposed to be, because I agree that it's kind of an identity crisis for the class right now. It's not really good at any of the things that it's supposed to be good at, and it's kind of dipping into a few different things. DPS, support. I would like to see the burglar, have some solid direction, one way or the other, and think about that to think about what direction to take that with the content that's out there in mind. CC really isn't important anymore, right? You don't. What instances require CC? I don't think any really. Can you name any, CO or Blood? That an instance that's currently like Pelennor, Osgiliath, or the Raid, the new stuff that's come out. What's required? Crowd control.
The only thing I can think of is OD Gortheron, and that's not new at all.
Yeah, exactly. So with how the content's changed, I think that needs to inform the decisions for how changes need to be made to the burglar class.
Chromite's saying Keys of Hardline maybe, and we've even seen that recently. We've taken a my champ, a captain that was healing, and a guardian tank, and just went in and grabbed it all in there and AoE'd it, and it was not a problem at all. So I think there's also something to be said that there's just a fundamental problem with 3-mans in this game. I think it really does create some exclusion. I think by having a 3-man, aren't you saying at that point that you have a trinity? Like you have tank, heals, and DPS?
Yeah.
I pretty much would think that, and I think a lot of the 3-man content at this point could be geared up a little bit and just made into 6-mans. And I know some people would be a little upset about that, but the game, let's take it back almost a decade to 2007. The game was optimized as a fellowship of 6. You did landscape content with either solo on up to however many friends you were playing with, and then everything beyond that until our first 3-man in Eregion with the stuff over in Mirabel was a 6-man or a 12-man. So 6 was that magic number, and I think when they started to try to pare it down to 3, we also we got some problems being exposed, and I think that's where the trait trees tried to come in and fix that, but they didn't execute it in a way that really allowed for a lot of classes to have that. Ultimately, the DPS role is, I think, the problem, because you have classes like an LM or a burglar or the support classes, trying to throw them into a DPS role and expect them to be a primary DPS role becomes a problem. I think that's where that all gets exposed. And then, so I personally would love to see all that stuff moved up to a 6-man. I know that's never going to happen, but I would really love to see the core mechanic of the game go back to a 6-man structure. I think that would kind of alleviate some of the heartache that goes on.
Yeah, definitely. And if they decide that they want to keep doing 3-mans because they like them, I could see why some people would really love 3-mans, because you don't have a ton of friends online that you like to play the game with, and you want to be able to go do an instance and getting 2 other friends online to play. That's not too hard to do. So, if they're going to stick with the 3-man thing, I think they really need to rethink the trait trees and giving support classes like Lore Master and Burglar, more viable main DPS roles. As we touched on PvP before a little bit, I'll put my 2 cents in on it. Frankly, I agree with Bloodborne's point of view about PvP being a side game in this game, and I frankly think that it's not ever possible to balance PvP as it currently is without mirroring the classes. You play a first-person shooter. What makes it balanced? Well, you can do essentially the same thing no matter what side you're on. So I think there just needs to be a total revamp in PvP, how it's implemented to level out the playing fields, and also a system in place that would keep it separate from what's happening in PvE because they're vastly different.
Sure. CEO, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's basically what I'm thinking too. You're never gonna have the balance, but if you make a class too overpowered as well, it's not gonna help anything.
Sure. Then you just run into the same problem that we have right now is, well, you know, every damage class is kind of putting their numbers up against the RK DPS, and well, we all want to be there, but I think if you do the same thing, like say they buff the Berg and they're really far up there, and then everybody's going to be stacking their numbers up against them, and then the nerf back comes out, and there's a whole other slew of problems that come out from that. But do you think that 3-man's kind of exposed that problem? Do you think 6 might be the magic number to kind of stick with?
Yeah, I personally love to see the game sticking with 6-mans. I feel it's a better number. You can design mechanics that are more fun because you have more people, more classes to be able to fill. You can build in a support role for every 6-man, something that requires crowd control, or if you don't have crowd control, it's going to make your life pretty tough in there without it, you know?
I think that could really work classes if we did that.
Lala had mentioned it up a little bit further about just a tweak of making a 3-man actually a 4, because we do have 4 distinct roles. We have tank, DPS, heals, and support. I guess the only concern there would be is like, how do you determine between 4 and 6? I mean, it's essentially, in my mind, that's almost the same content because of that 4th person being an extra DPS or support or whatever you want it to be. I think a 4-man content would essentially be the same as a 6. I think it'd be really, really difficult to make that content uniquely different than a 6-man.
I also think the issue with the 4-man instance, such, you would probably just bring another DPS to make it go quicker, and it'd be the same issue.
Right.
Yeah, stacking RKs or whatever.
Right.
Kind of could probably break it pretty quick.
Yeah, I would think so. Do you think there is an issue with? This is a very dangerous question, but do you think there is an issue where other classes do need to be brought down?
Not particularly. I mean, the raid is built around RKs.
Absolutely.
If they nerfed RKs, we wouldn't even be able to finish that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, very true. Yeah, I think that things need to be, for DPS wise, need to be balanced against what the RK can do right now, because as CEO just said, it's balanced against the raid. And, you know, it's not just the raid too. Silent Street, Dome of Stars less so, but definitely Silent Street. You know, you need good DPS numbers in there to complete that content. And when something's not stacking up against the RK, really, you know, I'd love to see it. It's probably possible to do it with no RK Silent Street 2-2 challenge, but those hunters, let's face it, are going to have the best gear that's currently out there to be able to do it. So I'm in favor of bringing other classes up to that level, because that's where that content level is at.
Sure.
For Silent Streets, I haven't noticed too much lack of DPS after the imbuement upgrade.
That's pretty true.
Interesting point.
Normally, I just run it with whatever I get. We usually don't have an issue.
Someone saying in chat, would well, let's see here. It's talking about nerfing the bosses to help nerf RK DPS. I would rather them not touch the raid, because I think right now it's designed very, very well. It's very challenging. It's possible to do all the fights, but it's very challenging. So rather than bring those numbers down and try to retool everything, I think that would be a lot of work. It'd be very difficult to get it back to where it was. They could overshoot it and make it near impossible, or they could go too far and make it, too easy. So I would just rather see them bring other classes up to the level that they need to be to participate in that fight.
To nerf it, it would be so awkward as well. It'd probably be reducing it by 2/3 the morale.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues potentially that wouldn't necessarily be nerfing, say, their damage. I know I've read a little bit of this, and I don't know. I'm kind of a sucker for role clarity. I like that personally a lot. I want to know that if I have excuse me, if I have this person in here and they're playing this class, I know what their role is. I know what they're going to be doing. And RK and Warden are two of the classes that come to mind where I think there's a lot of bridging between their skill sets that kind of creates a disparity between some of the other classes. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, like the RK having even deeply down into their red line. So if, my RK has 82 trait points as well. So having a fully decked out red line and you're dipping into some of those other traits, still being able to do something like steady hands and swap your allies real quick, and then still being able to throw out some pretty okay heals, having your bubbles, and then having SA, having your DNFs. I think that's where a lot of people have problems with some of the other classes right now, is their utility. Is something like an RK has so much utility in either healing or fire spec. Same deal goes with the Warden. In their blue line, they have so much damage, and in their red line, they have so much survivability. I think those are some things that really cause some frustration with other classes. Like, well, yeah, I'm going to take the RK because if we're in a tough spot, they just toss DNF on it and they keep on doing damage, and they just got a res from a damage class. Like, what is that? So I think there's issues like that could be addressed without like nerfing the overall class and bringing damage down. I think there's utility changes that could be made, and I think there's some good stuff behind that potentially.
Yeah, that definitely could help a little bit, bring some balance. But still, you gotta. I mean, really, the main issue I see with balance is those DPS numbers. No one comes close to RKs, and that level of DPS is needed for the hard content. So,
If I said no one should have that much power to do both at the same time, I agree. Wait, captains do.
yeah, then there's captains who are probably the ultimate support class. Everybody loves them.
Yep, tank heals, DPS buffs.
I remember recently they tried to nerf the Warden by their incoming healing and it didn't do anything.
Nope, you still have Gorlau out there doing tier 2 solo stuff, so all you got to do is watch one of his videos and know that they're still in a very overpowered state. But are there, so kind of getting close on time here. I try to keep the show around an hour. Are there any items that you would think are must-haves for your burglar class that you currently don't have? And one other question for both of you would be, what do you think about your consumable items? So like your marbles, caltrops, hatchets, knives, things like that. Do you think those need to be buffed or a permanent item so you don't have to consume them? Things like that. And then, so CEO, start with you on that one. What are your thoughts on that?
Consumables wise, I just think they need a lower cooldown. 10 minutes is far too long for a 5 target slow.
Okay, and then what about things like your signal and whatnot?
After they signal buff, I think they're actually in a good place, as long as FMs get buffed in the future.
Okay.
And like must-have items, I would have said a pot that opens your crit chain skills up, but as they're doing that with aim, I don't think it would be very helpful.
All right, and then Brooke, how about you?
Well, I'm kind of confused by the consumables. Like Theo said, the cooldown's far too long. Marbles, completely useless. I remember back in the day, they wouldn't work half the time. They were clunky. There's a lot of bugs with them. So I'd honestly just have them get completely reworked. They need it. Throwing knives, don't really understand those. They didn't do enough damage. I guess they made it so burglars could do a ranged pull, but you can do that. Something like Addle.
The knives do remove a corruption if you have a trick on the enemy.
Oh, okay. But the cooldown is pretty substantial. As far as something must have for the class, I really think that we need some AoE to participate in 3-mans and 6-mans as a DPS role to make us a little more justifiable to bring us along, and some more utility in yellow line. Give us some, respectable heals so that we can not only buff and debuff and increase the overall damage of the group, but give us some viable healing.
All right, and then I guess, is there just any overall final word that you would say on the burglars? Are you still looking forward to playing them in the future? And then, and after you guys have that, we'll go ahead and wrap up here and close it out. So let me know what you think.
I think the revamp is putting Bergs into a good place if they can fix what they said they're going to fix, offhand crits and such, and then fix a couple broken skills we have besides those.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hold my judgment out on that until it actually hits the live servers to see. As Theo just said, there's things that they said they fixed that aren't actually fixed. And without seeing what happens when those things get fixed, it's kind of hard to say if I think the class is in a good spot now. So I'm gonna have to wait till what happens on live to make that call.
Also, I'm not sure if they realize, but the devs on the offhands are hitting less than crits already.
Yeah, there's an issue with that on champs as well, where we have such a high dev chance, and our potion is for dev chance. Or a dev magnitude, and the dev magnitudes are actually still hitting for less than the crits, so that's kind of bad. All right, well, like I said, I want to try to keep it around an hour, so I want to thank both of you guys for coming on and chatting with me for a little bit here. And what I think I'm going to do with some of the class discussion things, I'm going to try to get those linked on the forum so it can kind of continue a discussion there. I know there's already plenty of discussions around particular classes, but I think actually hearing people talk about it is a big difference than actually than reading people talk about it, because you can never tell, if someone's kind of trolling you, or if it's being serious, or if they're joking or whatever. So hearing two burglars talk about it and being able to see the live chat and stuff like that, I think would be kind of a useful tool for even the devs, because I know they go back and watch these things as well. So might link that so we can continue some discussion there. But like I said, I want to thank both of you guys for coming on, and look forward to doing more of these things in the future. So if you guys want to be a part of those, just let me know, and that'll do it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. So that is going to wrap it up for our Berg chat on Echoes in the Dark. I got a couple things I want to talk about real quick before we completely wrap it up. And then I'm gonna get out of here and go play around on Bull Roar, because there's some fun stuff on there right now, which I highly encourage you to go play. So this is gonna be about my channel, twitch.tv/Bloodborne. We got a lot of stuff going on this month. For anybody that was watching this past week, we had a huge week over there. On Friday night, we had 150 viewers on there. Awesome. So if you have not been over to my channel, make sure you're visiting. It's twitch.tv/Bloodborne. I highly encourage everybody to come over there. We have a good old time over there. Get people in, do group stuff. Just everybody pokes fun at me. It's all good. Throughout this month, Mondays, we are doing a mount giveaway. It is the Steed of the White City. It is currently not available on the store, or last I checked, which was a couple days ago. So right now it is exclusive to those giveaways on Mondays. The streams start at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, very close to the start time of this one. Thursdays, currently, and these are tentative as far as the Thursday stream goes. I do a duo stream with Andang from LOTRO Players. And we rolled 2 new characters on Landreval, and we're kind of going over there. That's actually one of my first experiences over on Landreval. I've dabbled over there briefly, but you know, we're over there. So if you guys want to play along with us, that is same time, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Again, it's tentative because of our schedules, but it's looking like it's going to line up pretty well in the near future. Fridays throughout the month of October, we are doing 5,000 Turbine Point giveaways on my channel as well. That starts at 10 p.m. as well. I think that's about it. So a little plug about the channel again is that my goal is to get that channel partnered through Twitch. And that's for a couple reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that I want this game to get some more exposure. When you are a partner, when you're a new partner on Twitch, you actually get put into a 6-month rotation on the front page of Twitch. So that is very organic growth and exposure that, as most of you guys know, LOTRO doesn't do a ton of advertising. It's very, very slight. But something like that, it's not going to bring, hundreds of thousands of players to the game. But, it's something like, if we can get a little bit of talking going, and if we can get a little bit of hype generated, get people into the game, and we can get more people to play with, get more people to experience it, hype it up, I think that's all a good thing. That's my goal with that. In talking to the Twitch partnership team when I was out at TwitchCon this past weekend, you need around 100 viewers on a fairly consistent basis. So this past week was, since I've been back, was 60, 60, 60, 60, 150, and 60. So we're really close. And so I encourage you guys, and I really want you guys to do this for everybody that plays LOTRO. Go see their streams. There's stuff that you can learn from everybody. There's stuff that you can teach them, that can teach them how to play their class better, or let them have a better experience in the game. So I encourage all of you to go check out all the LOTRO streamers, not just me, because we are a community, right? That's what we're here to do, is to make this community better. And one of the ways to do that is support all of our social media outlets, whether that be the official LOTRO channel here, the official LOTRO YouTube page, the folks that do content on YouTube, the folks that do the LPN, the LOTRO Players News podcast. Great group of people over there, and they have a ton of information, and they're very fun to listen to. Subscribing to their podcast. There's actually going to be a listing made of kind of all of the social media outlets, and I know the wiki, the LOTRO wiki, actually has some of that already compiled. So it can be a great resource if you're looking for other avenues to experience game content. So yeah, that's kind of what my goal is in the near future. Is I would love to get that channel partnered so I can help everybody else in this community grow. So on that note, I'm gonna get off here for this weekend, And I'm going to go play on Boror for a little bit. So if you see me poking around in there, send me a tell, say hey. And I look forward to seeing you guys all week long on twitch.tv/Bloodborne. Hope you guys all have a great night, and I will see you soon. Take care.